Hello and welcome to the 5-9 webinar, How to Secure an Entire Hyper-V Network. My name is David Davis, and we've waited a few minutes here after the hour just to make sure everyone can join. I appreciate you attending today. We've got an exciting topic to cover. We'll be talking about Hyper-V security, and not just on the small scale, not just a single server, because of course Microsoft has best practices out there on how to secure a single server, with some, relatively manual things that you would want to do. Today we're talking about, securing an entire Hyper-V network, an entire Hyper-V, virtual infrastructure on a larger scale for, enterprise infrastructures and hosting companies. So let's go ahead and get started with the webinar. Before we get too far into the topic, I want to first briefly introduce myself, tell you a little bit about myself. Again, my name is David Davis, and I'm a virtualization evangelist, is what I call myself, because I write, I speak, and I create video training, most of it all around virtualization. My video training is from pluralsight.com, where I've created over 20 different courses, mostly on virtualization topics, and 2 of those courses were actually on Hyper-V. So if you're interested in, in learning more about Hyper-V, it's a good resource. I've got a number of different certifications. And before I started doing this, I was an IT manager of an enterprise data center where we implemented virtualization. We used server consolidation, very successfully. And so that was where I gained my real-world experience and passion about virtualization. So that's who I am. My blog is virtualizationsoftware.com, and I write for a lot of different online publications all around virtualization. If you want to reach me personally, you can contact me on Twitter, where I am David M. Davis. So with that, let's get started with an exciting Hyper-V security topic here. And we'll start off, talking about why is it that security is so important in virtualization. I mean, companies out there like you and me, we've consolidated our servers with virtualization. So, as we increase the number of virtual machines running in the virtual infrastructure, the number of high-density servers has increased. We used to have one operating system and one application per server. Now we might have 20, we might have 50, or in VDI deployments, large VDI deployments, you can have over 100 VMs per host, even on very large hosts with a lot of memory and a lot of CPU capacity. So we're putting more and more of our eggs, all into one basket. And because of that, those servers are so much more important than they ever were, in the past. And securing those servers is more important, even, more so than it was in the past. As we've consolidated our servers, we've also made it so much easier to create new virtual machines. So, instantly provisioning virtual machines is possible. You can very quickly clone a VM or create a VM from a template. And in many cases, a few seconds, you can have a brand new virtual machine running with a new operating system, new applications, and what else? More exposure points, more security issues to cover. So VM sprawl is certainly an issue at a lot of companies today, simply because of the ease of creating new VMs, and that's a security issue, frankly. As a data center manager, you need to ensure that all those VMs are secure, even the ones that someone created just a few seconds ago by cloning a VM or creating a VM from template. Another problem is intra-VM traffic. So you've got the virtual network that's been created with virtualization. Of course, it's very cool. It's very necessary, very important. But it also creates blind spots because, traditional network management tools and security admins and their management tools that they use for monitoring security in many cases aren't compatible, or they just don't know about the virtual network. So unless they go to a lot of effort to try to monitor the virtual network, it just doesn't come naturally with the tools they already have. And at many companies, it creates a big blind spot. So that intra-VM traffic from VM to VM is of great concern, especially in large enterprises and hosting companies. And then you've got dynamic IT loads. I mean, everything in the virtual infrastructure is constantly changing. You've got live VMs, you've got virtual machines migrating from host to host, and you've got really an ever-changing, security posture, an ever-changing security problem, frankly, because if you don't know where it is, it's difficult to secure. And as things constantly change, that creates, a major hurdle for security administrators. Before we talk about, the best practices for securing Hyper-V enterprise networks, if we take, yet again, a step back a little bit here and look at the problem of security, most people think about security in terms of layer 3 of the OSI model. The OSI model, layers 1 through 7, start with physical, go all the way up to application. So at physical, you've got, think about someone actually getting into the wiring closet and connecting an Ethernet cable to the network and gaining physical access, or getting physical access even into the data center. Of course, that's a concern, but most people just think about IP to IP communication, basic firewall stuff. Which IP can talk to, what other IP, or what ports were open, which goes just a little bit higher in the OSI model. Is port 80 open or not? Is RDP open or not? Basic port and IP stuff. And then, of course, you can have security issues all the way up to the application layer. There's application layer attacks, on web servers. So when you think of security, you have to think of this, comprehensively, and how to secure, the entire data center and all the layers, of the OSI model. So it's not enough to just have, say, an IP-based or port-based firewall to secure the virtual infrastructure. So what are the needs? Well, we talked about, dynamically changing virtual infrastructures. We talked about VM sprawl, high-density servers, and then the need to secure that virtual infrastructure, in many more areas than just, traditional firewall IP to IP communication. So the best way, in my opinion, for securing a Hyper-V virtual infrastructure is to leverage the Windows Server 2012, extensible switch. That extensible switch allows you to add in plugins to really monitor, or extensions, I should call them, which is what Microsoft calls them, Hyper-V host switch Windows extensions that allow you to add in additional functionality to the virtual network. So it could be antivirus, it could be firewall, it could be packet capture. There's a number of different, Hyper-V host extensions available. And 5.9, of course, has theirs, which is what we're, focusing on in this webinar. So these additional security and compliance capabilities, I've got a list of many of them here that you want to ensure that you're able to protect your Hyper-V infrastructure from. So, Agentless antivirus, orchestrated scans for antivirus protection. Of course, you want centralized management, and you also want real-time monitoring as well, because doing periodic antivirus scans isn't going to be, give you complete protection in many cases. You'll want application-level protection. So how can you protect, for example, a particular web server that's talking, directly to the internet? How can you isolate your virtual machine? So this is especially important in hosted environments where, you've got hosters providing virtual machines for, many different companies. So those virtual machines within that company, they need to talk to one another, but obviously you don't want that company talking, to another company. So this is called multi-tenant, protection. You've got multiple tenants. You want to secure them or protect them, from one another, but they need to be able to talk, to their virtual machines that they are, paying for and using, each month to run their business-critical applications. What about, protecting intra-VM traffic, VM to VM even? If you just want, say, web server queries to go back and forth, to the web server only on the virtual network, you need to be able to define that, basically, without going out to the physical network through some, physical traditional firewall appliance. You also need, stateful deep packet inspection, so not just, individual IPs and ports, but, going to a much deeper level. And then when a virtual machine moves from one host to another, those security policies and firewall rules that you've created and antivirus policies, all of those need to follow that VM, as it moves from one host to another. And then granular quality of service, because so many, security attacks are denial of service attacks, where basically the network is just, flooded and critical services are stopped. So if someone can shut down, let's say DNS on a network, then they've denied service and they've prevented, let's say, web servers or email servers from providing the services that your company is trying to provide. So quality of service is what's going to prevent that type of thing in many cases, because you can throttle the bandwidth, going to and from a particular host, and then you want to be able to aggregate, all of the data that you're collecting and analyze it, and then have logs available for, say, auditors or your boss or your, customers to prove that yes, you are securing the virtual infrastructure and their business critical applications. So these are the needs, as I listed them out, of what a Hyper-V virtual infrastructure needs to supply in terms of security and compliance protection. And of course, the whole goal here is, you want to manage your risk, you want to improve the protection for the virtual infrastructure, and then finally to ensure compliance. So now let's talk about the 5 best practices for securing a Hyper-V virtual infrastructure. And we're going to go into each one of these in more detail. So at this point, I'm just going to kind of sum them up. Of course, you want to be able to isolate virtual machines with a virtual firewall. You want to be able to use antivirus in an agentless manner, so you don't have to install agents on every single virtual machine in the virtual infrastructure, which is a tremendous waste of resources. You need to be able to enforce compliance and prove that, yes, you are doing your job and securing the virtual infrastructure. You need intrusion detection. So if something does come through the firewall, you need to be able to detect that and be able to take action. And then finally, you want it all, consolidated into a single pane of glass, a single management interface of some sort, so you don't have to go to multiple applications, to make all of this happen. That way, it's going to allow you to do your job, quickly and easily. So let's take these one at a time. We'll start with, isolating virtual machines with a virtual firewall. So in the first example there, on the top, the first graphic, you see you've got 2 different virtual machines, and let's say they're running on the same Hyper-V host, or they might even be running on different Hyper-V hosts. But it could just be one virtual machine, or it could be, 10 or 100 virtual machines even on each side of this firewall. And what the graphic is depicting is that you can, with the virtual firewall, you can create rules to prevent these virtual machines or even groups of virtual machines from talking to one another. So you want to say, customer A cannot talk to customer B's virtual machines. Their virtual machines just need to be able to, let's say, get out to the internet and provide specific, services out on the internet. For example, returning web requests or web pages or email, communication. So that's one way the virtual firewall works. And then it also works with security groups. So you want to be able to group virtual machines, so you can say, even within, company A, company A's web servers can only talk to company A's database servers, and they can only communicate on specific ports. For example, SQL queries or web server queries. And then, oh, by the way, if you have someone else working at even company A, you don't want that person, maybe it's an HR person or a marketing person running a VDI desktop, you don't want them to be able to communicate, let's say, with the web servers or the database servers, because frankly that doesn't have to do anything with their job. Maybe this web server farm and database server farm is just talking out to the internet. So just some examples here of rules where you can create rules not only based on an individual VM, but also based on groups of virtual machines. And oh, by the way, you're not doing this based on IP address of the virtual machine or DNS server name. You're doing it based on actually the Hyper-V virtual machine name. So what I mean by that is, on the top example there, virtual machine 1 and 2, they don't even have to have operating systems loaded on them. So you don't have to worry about the IP address that's on there. You could just give a blank VM to someone, and you could create a rule about it, and then they could go about installing the operating system. Or let's say they change the IP address. It really doesn't matter, because it's all based on the Hyper-V virtual machine name, and that's what you're creating these firewall rules based upon. So that's one of the critical things that you need to do to, of course, protect your Hyper-V virtual infrastructure. Something else that I always recommend is agentless antivirus. Virtualization gives us, so many different benefits. Containerizing these virtual machines, which allows them to be portable, which enables simplified backup protection and disaster recovery, and so many other benefits. Well, one of those benefits of virtualization is that you can now use agentless antivirus, which wasn't ever possible with physical servers. So, of course, the old way would be, to have physical servers, and you install an antivirus agent on every one of them, and they'll have their own security policies. They report back to some, antivirus, probably another physical server running the antivirus, management software. And all of this takes a tremendous amount of resources. So with Hyper-V and Agentless antivirus, you can actually use the Windows Server 2012, again, extensible switch, to monitor the virtual machines, and also to scan the virtual machines on a set schedule. So it goes out there and it scans the virtual disk files, the VHDXs, to find out if those VHDXs contain virus signatures, and it'll detect those, and then it can, of course, clean those as well. So you can scan, tens or hundreds of virtual machines, in a fraction of the time that it used to take using the agent-based approach, and do it with so much less CPU utilization. So if we take a look at how this works, on the left-hand side of this graphic here, you can see the common full system antivirus scan, and it scans the files over and over again, and it might take 40 minutes to several hours to scan a single server. Or if you install an agent in a virtual machine, again, it's still going to take the same amount of time, and it's going to consume so many IOPS, and it's going to make a very large impact on the virtual infrastructure utilization. Then if you multiply that times however many virtual machines you have, could be 100 or 1,000 virtual machines, you've invested a lot of money in this virtual infrastructure for the servers and for the storage, and honestly, you're wasting those resources performing these full system antivirus scans. The alternative here that we're talking about is agentless-based antivirus, which first performs a full scan of the VHDX file, the virtual disk file, which takes very little time. And then after that, it can perform incremental antivirus scans using what they call change block tracking, or CBT. So change block tracking simply keeps track of the blocks of the virtual disk file that have changed, and then the next time that an incremental scan is run, it only scans those changed blocks. So this can happen in seconds and has almost no impact on the host performance. So if we take a look at how this might look for a single VM, on the left-hand side here, you can see a date stamp and the scanning time of this VM. So it took 25 seconds. The next day, or actually the first day, 25 seconds, then 15, then 30, and then 12 seconds. So you see just a few seconds here. And on the right-hand side, you can see the number of objects that have changed, basically the blocks that have changed, and the time that it takes to perform these scans. So, of course, if a threat is found in the virtual disk file, then the agentless antivirus can remediate that and remove actually that virus out. So this is what it looks like to use agentless antivirus on an individual VM. And then, of course, what Five9 Security does is you can see a consolidated view of these scans across all your virtual machines in a single place, and you can create schedules as to when you want to perform these scans all in a single place from a single interface, which is vastly more efficient than having multiple agents out there and an antivirus manager and creating schedules and using a lot of resources. So this is agentless antivirus, and it's part of Five9 Security. Moving on to number 3, that is enforcing compliance. So your company might be affected by compliance requirements like PCI, due process credit cards, HIPAA related to human resources information, Sarbanes-Oxley if you're a publicly traded company. Even if you're not affected by one of these compliance requirements, even if you just have a regular private company and you're fortunate enough to not have these type of requirements, in many cases you're going to have still auditors even. I worked at a private company, and the bank required that we still have auditors come in and audit our company, the financials, as well as the information, security policies and the data center security processes. So, and even if you don't have auditors, I challenge you to still ensure that your company is secure by meeting some of these compliance requirements. So these compliance requirements, require you to do things like monitor and test, network systems with intrusion detection systems, or IDS. So they're monitoring for any, unwelcome and unauthorized intrusions to the network infrastructure. Have a company security policy. Every company should have one, and they should know it, inside out if you're in IT, and then ensure that you're enforcing it every day. And then finally, well, actually two more points I want to make, is to make sure you have a firewall that, for example, if you're under a PCI compliance requirements, it protects your cardholder data. I'm sure you've seen, those horror stories in the news about companies who lost so many million cardholder, credit card records from their company. That's not something you want to do. It costs millions of dollars, and in many cases, the company can, even go out of business if this happens. So a virtual firewall is what's going to protect you from that. And then, regularly use antivirus software. And really, Agentless, I think, is kind of the no-brainer way to go. It's much more efficient for you and for your server infrastructure as well. So these are some of the things you would want to do to enforce compliance: intrusion detection, security policies, virtual firewall, and agentless antivirus. So let's talk a little bit more about intrusion detection. Here you see a screenshot actually from Five9 Cloud Security, and here we are on the IDS tab. And what this is doing is showing us a report from, actually it's a single-day report, and you can see the time, a date stamp there. You can see the source virtual machine and the destination virtual machine, and that's by Hyper-V virtual machine name, not by IP address. As I said, you can even change the IP address in the VM, and it's still going to have the same destination virtual machine name, which is why this is such a great way to, to use security and leverage virtualization. So you can see the alert ID there, source and destination IPs, source and destination port numbers, and the alert is related to an IIS command.exe access. So basically, through the web server, someone was able to access a command prompt and execute a command on a web server, which is, as you might or probably know, a great security violation. So that's certainly something you want to prevent. And Five9, intrusion detection does this real-time threat monitoring to prevent this, from happening. And by the way, you didn't have to install a large appliance, physical server in the data center to make, that IDS possible. Believe me, I've done that in the past, costing tens of thousands of dollars, very expensive IDS appliances that use, span ports off of switches to try to mirror traffic, monitor that traffic, and then send alerts. And it's all, trust me, very painful and very inefficient. So doing it in the virtual infrastructure today is so much easier than in the past. Then point number 5 here is that you want to have centralized management. So you want to make sure that, you don't have separate interfaces for all these different applications, that you can manage, antivirus, virtual firewall, and IDS, and ensure compliance and run reports all from a single interface. So Five9 has a standalone Windows application, and then they also have a System Center Virtual Machine Manager plugin to allow you to do these types of things. So this is what the application looks like, and I've actually installed this in my lab as well, so that I can manage Hyper-V virtual machines and create rules in between them, and really test this out for myself. And Five9 offers a free evaluation, so you can do that as well. They also offer live demonstrations. So let's take a look at what this looks like here. If we start at the top left, you've got global rules. So these are, all VMs, customer 1, customer 2, and then it could be web clients, web servers, whatever, global groups you want to create. You can also create groups based on tenants. So if you have different tenants, if you're a hosting company, a multi-tenant environment, that's where you would go to do that. And then Hyper-V hosts would be below that, and then all the virtual machines running on those hosts. So these are individual Hyper-V virtual machine names, and then you can make firewall rules or antivirus protection security policies or quality of service policies based both on individual virtual machines as well as groups that you define up in the tree there, the tenants or the global groups. So these types of rules and policies can be applied very granularly or in a larger environment very broadly. So below that, on the center there, you see you've got tabs for firewall status for whatever object you have selected. IDS, we're looking here at the antivirus tab where you can start scans, full scans, view logs about what's been happening for an individual virtual machine. Active protection is you do have the option to load an agent inside a virtual machine if you choose to do so to provide real-time protection. A few companies choose to do that. You can see information about quarantine there, where if any virtual machine did have viruses, those virtual machine, the files would be quarantined and then rebooted if needed. So the top right here, you've got where you can review the rules that you've created for these individual virtual machines or entire groups of virtual machines. So this is very much like creating rules on a Cisco router or firewall, but as you can imagine, doing it inside a Windows graphical interface, it's much more intuitive and much easier. And because you're doing it for the entire Hyper-V virtual infrastructure, it's much more efficient. So it's a very quick installation and a very easy to use Windows application for managing security across an entire Hyper-V virtual infrastructure. So now let's review what cloud security for Hyper-V offers. It's an enterprise-grade product. It aggregates security control in a single place. It's a simple deployment, and it leverages the Windows Server 2012 extensible switch. So it provides agentless antivirus and anti-malware, and so there's no degradation of performance by using the agentless approach. You've got agentless virtual firewall, so you can isolate virtual machines or even groups of virtual machines, and that really works ideally for multi-tenant environments. It provides stateful deep packet inspection, quality of service, and then you can aggregate all of the logs for traffic that's been allowed or traffic that's been denied in a single place. Then finally, agentless intrusion detection. So it's real-time threat monitoring. It's signature-based. It can block application-level attacks, and it does have a behavioral component as well. So it's proactive. It can detect, warn, and block, just like those traditional, very expensive intrusion detection appliances that I'm sure many companies out there are still using. So those are the core features of Five9 Cloud Security for Hyper-V. And now I'd like to review, what you need to be doing to ensure that your Hyper-V data center, is secure. If you're using Hyper-V, I think you're one step ahead of the game for, as compared to many companies out there that have so many, traditional physical servers, because it's going to allow you to be, so much more efficient. Not only are you able to consolidate your virtual machines and, reduce the number of physical servers, reduce your power and cooling requirements, make yourself more efficient as an administrator, because you can administrate all those from, Hyper-V Manager or System Center Virtual Machine Manager. But then you can also leverage, other advanced features. Of course, Hyper-V has a number of advanced features, live migration, live storage migration, high availability, and, load balancing features. But you've also got this extensible switch that they've created, which, very intelligently allows you to use third-party security and network functionality and bring it into your Hyper-V infrastructure. So the Hyper-V extensible switch, you want to make sure that you find only certified solutions. Don't download stuff from the internet from companies that aren't certified, because these extensions, as you can guess, are very powerful to monitor the entire virtual network and even block packets or scan virtual machine disk files. So the Hyper-V switch extension is what allows Five9 security to provide intrusion detection as well as antivirus and anti-malware. And here's kind of my checklist right here. I would, no matter what solution you choose, I would always look for an agentless solution for your Hyper-V infrastructure because it's going to make scanning so much more efficient. Look for solutions that provide centralized management of all the logs and analysis, and also can provide compliance reports. I think that's very important for you to help justify your job and to prove that you are indeed securing the Hyper-V infrastructure to auditors or compliance bodies that might require that. You want to be able to isolate virtual machines, both individually and by group, and whatever solution you choose should allow you to continue using Hyper-V's advanced features like live migration, where virtual machines are moving back and forth, and you're still able to protect them and still able to apply those same security policies. So that's my checklist for securing the modern data center. And before we conclude the webinar here, I want to talk about why forward-thinking companies are choosing Five9. And by the way, if you haven't already, make sure that if you have any questions about Hyper-V security in general, or if you have any questions about Five9's cloud security product, make sure you enter those in the question and answer box, because in just a few minutes here, we'll be glad to accept questions, and we'll be answering those to the best of our abilities related to Hyper-V security. So again, this is why forward-thinking companies are choosing Five9, and that's because honestly, there are very few solutions out there for securing Hyper-V today that are this comprehensive. It's built purposely for Hyper-V security. You don't want a tool out there that was built for securing physical servers and they've somehow modified it or tweaked it. You want a tool that's purpose-built for the job you're trying to do, which is protecting the Hyper-V virtual infrastructure. So this is a native tool built for Windows Server from the ground up. It's optimized for Windows Server, leverages the Hyper-V vSwitch and Windows filtering, uses the agentless antivirus approach. It's multi-layered, so it does not only virtual firewall, but also antivirus, intrusion detection. It can isolate virtual machines both by ID, by name, by organizational unit, and even user. So you've got a lot of granularity in how you control the communications between virtual machines, even more so than just the Hyper-V name. Five9 Cloud Security supports virtualization in enterprise networks, but also it's designed with multi-tenant scenarios in mind. And the goal here, of course, is to relieve administrator headache and make you so much more efficient as a Hyper-V administrator. So you've got centralized management and control of security and compliance, administration of policies, rules, and filters in a single place, log analysis, all in a single interface. And so really you're prepared to deal with whatever security threat might affect your virtual infrastructure, and prepared to do it as efficiently as possible. And then finally, most companies are choosing Hyper-V really to save money, to get the maximum return on investment that they can. So Five9 Security even works with free Hyper-V. So if you didn't pay a dime for Hyper-V, you can still leverage the extensible virtual switch in Windows Server 2012 Hyper-V, and you can utilize all these capabilities that I've just talked about. So you're able to maximize your Hyper-V investment by using this agentless approach, so you don't increase your storage I/O utilization or your CPU utilization. You're able to maximize your consolidation ratio by still getting as many virtual machines as possible on a single host. And then you're able to utilize the Hyper-V infrastructure without degrading any performance while still protecting it. So that's what Five9 security and cloud security provide you. And with that, I'd like to move to questions and answers. Again, both about Hyper-V security in general, or about Five9 security solutions. I've got Alexander Karavanov joining me. He's a virtualization security engineer at Five9 Software. And so if you have any questions, just put them in the GoToWebinar chat box right there, or the question and answer box, and we're glad to help you out. Alexander, let's go ahead and start with, I know, some of the most common questions about Hyper-V security and Five9 in general, while some of the attendees are entering their questions. I know one of the questions that I had is, can Five9, cloud security, can it be administered from the command line at all? Are there any command line options for securing the Hyper-V infrastructure thanks to Five9?
Hello, everyone. Hello, David. Yes, at this point, we do provide with PowerShell API functionality. So if you need to automate what you're doing, you can easily do that and leverage that functionality to automate your everyday tasks. So basically, for big data centers, this is a really big help and really allows people to save quite a bit of time. So basically, I can see that we have quite a few questions in our question box. I'll keep answering them. And David, actually, if probably you can help everyone, you can probably read some of my answers aloud. I have a few questions going on that I want to answer. Probably at first, doing that in text at the moment. So please go ahead and type your questions in. We'll have a pretty long list. We'll answer them one by one, and surely even after we finish the session, we'll run the questions and answers for a little bit more time, so every single of your questions gets answered. So probably, David, if you have any other comments, just please go ahead, and I'll keep answering the questions right now.
Okay. Yeah. I attended TechEd last year and was very impressed by what Microsoft is doing to build their Hyper-V ecosystem to make it ready for enterprise networks. And one of the things they're doing, I think a great example of it is this extensible switch that they've created. And the cool thing is it's compatible with every version of Hyper-V, and you don't have to, purchase any specific software license to use the extensible switch. And so the great thing about that is, there's individual, developers out there creating tools or extensions for the extensible switch. There are small startup companies and, even large companies. And I think Five9 is a great example of, leveraging everything that's possible with that extensible switch. Because you all are doing so much, not just providing a single, function, but a tool that provides really a complete, security protection suite for Hyper-V virtual infrastructures. Alexander, what are some of the most, common questions that you all have about Five9 security for those who are just getting started with it?
Just probably we can go over some of the questions we have right now. The very common question we have, actually people ask about whether cloud security can work on the cluster environment, and the answer is absolutely yes. So it does really matter for us what kind of setup you have as far as Five9 host services running on each of your Hyper-V hosts, and you have added them into the console. You can manage and keep your environment protected. And so even if live migration happens, so if virtual machine migrates from one host to another, all the rules you've configured for that virtual machine will keep working. So it doesn't really make any difference for us. We do have the complete information about the virtual environment, and therefore we are able to monitor that and keep that up and running in a very effective manner.
Yeah, that's a great point. Clustered environments, because large enterprises and hosters are going to be utilizing clustering. So that's a great point. While we're answering some of the questions in the chat, I've gone ahead and moved to the next slide here, which is the URL if you want to go ahead and download the free trial of Five9 Cloud Security for Hyper-V. It's right there, five9.com/cloud security. And it's a real small installation, easy install. I've done it myself. And if you would like a personal product demo, which I've seen myself as well, from Five9, you can email them at info@five9.com, or there's their phone number right there. Alexander, another question I had about Five9 Cloud Security is what operating systems does it support? If you're running Linux, let's say, on the virtual machines, or can those virtual machines be protected in any manner?
Absolutely. So our solution is agentless solution, right? So for the firewall protection, for the IDaaS protection, and actually for the agentless antivirus part for full system scans. So we don't really care about what is installed inside the virtual machine. The virtual firewall and IDaaS really don't have any connection with virtual machine operating system inside, and you outlined that actually already. As of the agentless antivirus, so which performs the scans of VHD and VHDX files directly, now this can actually easily work with NTFS file systems. So this is a really absolute support for the Linux file system. So X2, X3 ones, we actually do perform the detection of viruses and let you know what's inside. But part of that, you free up your resources. You don't have to use very valuable resources or virtual machines to do these security operations.
Okay, great information. Great information. Another question I had is, I know a lot of Hyper-V admins are, very cost conscious, and in many cases that's why they chose Hyper-V, because it was had a greater return on investment for their company. How is Five9 Cloud Security priced? Is it per socket, per VM, or what's the model for that?
So the model for the Five9 Cloud Security for enterprise customers is based on couples of CPUs. So it's priced per 2 CPU, which is a very convenient approach. And the hosting part of business, so they actually have their ability to license that per virtual machine being used with our security solution. So both ways are possible. So hosting providers can actually choose which one works better. For enterprise customers, we offer the per 2 CPU model.
Okay, very good. So you got a number of different options, which I think is great, because it depends on what type of customer they are and what they're trying to do with their Hyper-V infrastructure. When it comes to, one of the things I noted is, not only can you create rules based on Hyper-V virtual machine names, but there's a number of other ways to create rules that are more granular. And I noticed in the documentation and the slides, we talked about, what was it, Active Directory, is it Active Directory user, or what are the other more granular ways to create firewall rules?
Basically, you can surely use the really common approaches and use the IP address and MAC address. But the reason the per virtual machine rules creation is so convenient, actually you don't really have to know the IP address or MAC address of the virtual machine. So we do that job for you. And actually these rules are based not just on virtual machine name, but actually that's a unique combination which represents the virtual machine, and that's why these are really effective. So if someone changes the virtual machine name, so the rules keep working. It's just I want everyone to be confident about that. So it does really make any difference for us. As of the tenants top, surely you can, if you want to let your tenants, your customers, to manage their firewall rules themselves, you can do that, and you can create an account for them inside Five9 Cloud Security Console by using their Active Directory account, and you can give them their own virtual machines for firewall rules management. And you can also limit them to specific operations, whether you want to give them just audit rights so they can see what you've set up for them, or you can give them the administrator rights for their virtual machines only, so which can be pretty convenient for this setup.
Oh, okay. Very nice. Very nice. What about, let's see, with clones of virtual machines, like in VDI environments, where people roll out, a mass number of clones of VMs. Is there some, when people roll out into VMs, is there something you have to do to protect those, or are they automatically protected, or how does that work?
As of the automatic rollout, so this is actually, you can probably configure when you do the rollout. Basically what we offer, so we offer you the API capabilities, so you can use our APIs to automatically provide virtual machines with the security protection. So this is what you do. By default, you know that whenever a virtual machine is being added in the environment and you enable the firewall monitoring, so this virtual machine has to have a firewall rules set up for that to allow the traffic coming and going away, right? So we work by the most secure approach. So if the virtual machine is not allowed to perform some actions, that all of them are prohibited for that. So that's why if you provide some VDI automation, so you just brief line, you just need to insert during the provisioning process, and that virtual machine will be added to the group needed. It will be added to a certain antivirus scenario, so all of that available.
Great, great. And I know I talked about, in the presentation here, how much more efficient agentless antivirus is over agent-based approaches. Do you have any sort of general number, like, what percentage of performance increase or decrease, you get by using one or the other?
Basically, just by virtual machine density, this is something which we can mention. Definitely 30% VM density increase. This is what immediately happens. The reason actually for that, whenever you have more than 5 virtual machines running on the host and the full system scans are happening, even if you schedule them properly, still some of them may overlap each other. And imagine this scenario whenever you're trying to work on your laptop while the full system antivirus scan is running. Basically, this is something everyone has experienced in their life. So you really can't do the job done, get the job done, because the computer is really, really slow. So in the virtual infrastructure, so you may have these scans running and you schedule them. So if you have 5 virtual machines, probably you can split these scans over the time, but you still have to go over and over. You use valuable IOPS of your hard disks, and therefore you have to have more expensive disk storage system if you do that. So this is really intensive for the virtual environment. If you go over the 5 virtual machines, there is a very big chance that scans will overlap, and this actually is causing the antivirus storms to happen. So these storms will cause the performance degradation, sometimes even several times, and basically that can really ruin the entire host performance if there are scans happening all together. So whenever I talk to customers, actually, they weren't thinking about antivirus protection at all because of this fact sometimes. And with Five9 Cloud Security, they're able to offload this task, first of all, to the host level. And second part of that, so we are absolutely aware about the host performance, so we can really orchestrate that very well according to the host performance. And also the change block tracking driver approach, so incremental scans happening really help. So this are the ones which decrease the time needed for the full system antivirus scan or virtual machine to seconds, basically. So this is also very time saving and of course very performance saving.
Wow, very impressive. I mean, I know a lot of companies, they've just stopped doing antivirus because they can't manage it, or it's just too much of an impact on performance. And you know, I've turned off antivirus scan on my laptop, like you said, many a time. So this is finally going to allow enterprises to really secure their virtual infrastructures, which is especially important, you know, like we said, for hosting companies and for anyone doing VDI, but really for all companies. So, I mean, a 30% increase if you take a physical server, what you've invested in that, and all the, you know, infrastructure around it that makes it work, 30% of the cost of that, you know, total server can be eaten up essentially by, you know, traditional agent-based antivirus. So here, you know, you might even be able to pay for Five9 cloud security just by, you know, just in the savings that you'll gain in performance and the additional, you know, virtual machine consolidations you'll be able to gain by using the agentless approach. So very cool stuff. Alexander, do you have anything else to add, or any other, you know, questions you wanted to discuss? I know you're answering a number of questions in the chat window, but do you have anything else to add before we wrap up?
I think I'm good. I want to thank everyone for today's participation on webinar. Thank you, David, for really interesting webinar for everyone. And I want to assure everyone that I'll answer all the questions you have. Unfortunately, I'm not doing it as fast as I wish, but definitely we have quite a few questions in here, and we'll share the answers with you after the session.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll make sure it gets all the questions, even if we have to do it via email after the webinar. So thanks, everyone, so much for joining today. Five9 Cloud Security has a great product available from five9.com, and I appreciate your participation. Again, David Davis, thanks for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.